Good afternoon. My name is Chung. I'm the moderator for this very important session called China and Global Governance. And this topic probably doesn't need an introduction. China has risen to become probably one of the two most important countries with the United States. So that led to many countries expecting China to make more contributions to global governance. And of course, we might say that these expectations are justified or maybe too much for China to accept at this point in their development. So there are many debates in this area. For me personally, there are many important questions. I hope some which will be addressed today. And how much and in what ways is China contributing to global governance? Is China capable of making those contributions? And I think this is personally the most important question. Is China exercising its influence and power in a responsible way? And we have four panelists today. And let me briefly introduce each one of them. And on my left is Professor Kim Jae-chun. He's an expert on global security. And he's a professor at the Graduate School of International Studies at Sogang University. Next to him is Professor Lee Min-jiang. He's an associate professor at the Nanyang Technology University. And he's written widely on China's global policy since getting a PhD in political science from Boston University. And we have another guest panelist from Korea, Professor Nam Chang-hee. He's a well-known security specialist in Korea. He's a professor in the Department of Political Science at Inha University. And we have Professor Pang Song-ying from Renmin University. And he has written widely on China's role in global governance. And he has a PhD in international relations from Peking University. So without further ado, let me turn to Professor Kim on his views on China's role in global governance. Each panelist will speak 5 to 7 minutes, and that'll take us to 4:30. Then we'll open the floor to participants for a Q&A session. So,
well, yeah, thank you very much, Professor Mo, for kind introduction. As for me, it's a great honor and brings me a great pleasure to be a part of this venue and speak amongst the distinguished scholars and experts. But to be honest, let me be upfront and say to you that I am not an expert on China, nor an expert on global governance. So I have to admit that my knowledge about this particular subject is very limited. So what I'm going to do today is to just throw in several talking points that Asan has asked me to prepare. So I'm going to just throw in several talking points, and I kind of hope that the panel will take care of the rest. Today's session is titled China and Global Governance. So you're looking at two very important things or events, rather, in international relations in recent decades. That is, I think one is rise of China, and the other is growing importance on the need for a more efficient global governance to deal with the new challenges of the 21st century. So there's very little doubt that China has been on the rise, and at the same time, there is a growing need for the international community to establish or reinforce new types of global governance to better deal with the challenges of the 21st century in more efficient manner. But I think there is a perception, somehow there is a perception out there that China, rise of China and global governance don't really go along together. You know, I hope this is a misperception, but there is a perception that China is going to be not that cooperative toward our efforts to establish and reinforce global governance. You know, more worse, I mean, China could actually spoil our efforts to establish and reinforce global governance. And as I said before, I hope this is misperception. I am pretty sure that China's interest would be, I think it is in the interest of China to cooperate more with the global governance and contribute more to it to increase its national interest. At the same time, I think global governance would be better off. I think somehow global governance would be better off if we could somehow induce more cooperation and participation from China. That said, I think this is my take. I think China has been a lot more contributing toward the global governance than we usually think. As Gil claimed, China plays a critical role on global issues from non-proliferation to climate change. So China has become an active contributor or a participant, if you will, to global governance. But I think this is what we have to keep in mind when you talk about proper role of China in terms of contributing to global governance. I think any discussion on China's proper role in global governance should be premised upon the fact that China is still a relatively newcomer to global governance in comparison to other players such as the United States, EU, and Japan. Although China is fastly being integrated to international community and global governance, I think we'll have to admit, we'll have to start our discussion on the premise that China still is a newcomer to global governance, and we'll have to, I don't know how I can put it in English language, but I think we have to somehow give China a little bit of break when we talk about China's proper role in global governance. I listed, I don't know whether you have this presentation material that I prepared, but I listed two issue areas that require better global governance. One is climate change, global governance on climate change, and the other is global governance on human rights. And then my take is that China has been contributing to these global governance on climate change, global warming, and human rights substantially more than we usually think. Okay? And in order for us to better understand China's position toward the global governance on climate change, I think, well, I have a difficulty. I think I need a multifocal. I think we should understand the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. Common but differentiated responsibility. I think this principle China is in support of is very crucial to better understanding of China's perspective toward the global governance. It basically means that developed countries should be held more responsible for containing global warming. That doesn't necessarily mean that China is not going to, or developing countries are not going to play any role. Developing countries, including, I'm not really sure whether China is a developing country, but China and other developing countries should also do their part of the bargain. They will also have to contribute more to global governance on climate change or global warming, but differentially, albeit differentially. So China's contribution is going to be a little bit different from developed countries. I think we will have to understand that principle in order for us to better understand China's perspective toward global governance on climate change or global warming. Human rights, I think it's one of the thorny issues that China is confronted with, but China, I think, has done their fair share of efforts to protect the basic rights of Chinese citizens. And China has paid heed to constructive criticisms of international community. So that's the impression I have with regard to China's participation in global governance on human rights. Internationally, China in recent years have joined a number of international agreements on human rights and taken meaningful measures to improve human rights situations within its borders. And I think steps that China has taken should be considered as significant given its increasingly important role in global governance, including the one on human rights. So to sum up my very short talking points, I think China's views on sovereignty and intervention in recent years began to display signs of greater flexibility and also pragmatism across a range of international issues, from climate change, renewable energy, governance on renewable energy, governance on human rights. Across a range of international issues, my take is that China has begun displaying signs of greater flexibility and pragmatism, and China's views, so therefore China's views on global governance are increasingly convergent with those of the international community. And Chinese leadership has, since the late 1990s, implemented a new approach which is more confident, proactive, and convergent with the international norms. So maybe 2 points. China has become a more responsible actor in matters related to global governance. And second, but still, that doesn't mean that there is nothing to be desired here. I think China will somehow have to rectify. I can't really single out, the domestic policies of China, but somehow I think China will have to do their share of tasks to, correct some of the domestic laws and participate more in global governance to contribute more to global governance of human rights and other important issue areas of international relations. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll be a moderator until my turn comes as a panelist. That means that after Professor Lee speaks, then I will speak for 5 and 7 minutes, then my friend Evan will take over as the moderator.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, Professor Kim has laid out some of the major observations or facts with regard to China's role in global governance. I want to add one point here. Although scholars in China have been writing on global governance, like Professor Pang has been writing a lot of things on global governance and China's role in global governance, but the concept of global governance itself has entered foreign policy formulation fairly recently. It was about 3 years ago that we started to see global governance being used by top leaders in official documents. And of course, I'm sure you've noticed that in the 18th Party Congress Political Report, it is mentioned again. It is mentioned that China will do more things, will be more active in participating in global governance. So there's expectation in China, as well as in the outside world, for China to play a more active, more important role in global governance. And I want to tackle this question, how active China can be in joining global governance. Can China really take a leading role in global governance? When it comes to global governance, because there are too many things, too many issue areas, right? Global health, human rights, security, trade, etc., etc. So it's really difficult to, to look at all these issue areas and make a conclusion. What I'm going to do in my presentation is to look at one aspect, look at some of the facts of China's financial contribution to global governance. We know that you wanted to participate in global governance, you want to solve a global problem, you need money, right? And to have some clue as to how China is going to participate in global governance, I think it would be interesting and useful perspective to really examine China's financial contribution to global governance. And from these numbers, we can tell to what extent China is really committed to global governance, because rhetoric could be very cheap. When it comes to real intention, money really matters. In order to make sure that you don't get lost in at the end of my presentation, I will argue that it's too early to tell that China will play a leading role in global governance. It will take a lot of time for China to learn and to really internalize the concepts of global governance and come up with the coherent approach to global governance. And at this moment, what I can tell from the numbers, in a minute I will explain, that China still views global governance largely as an instrument for other foreign policy goals. Okay, these are the numbers. I prepared some slides, but now I realize I'm not going to use the slides. If you look at the financial contributions to United Nations peacekeeping operations, for instance, the record of China's financial contribution is not very, really not very impressive. Well, first of all, before I read out some of the numbers, let me make a distinction here. In terms of compulsory financial contribution to all these international institutions and regimes, China has done a fairly good job. China has paid or contributed the amounts of financial dues that are required. There's no doubt about it. But when it comes to voluntary financial contribution to all these global international regimes and institutions about global governance, the record of China or China's contribution is not very really impressive. Look at the UN peacekeeping operations financial contribution, for instance. In 2011-2012, this financial year, you see China contributed only about 4% to UN PKOs. In contrast, the US contributed about 27%. Japan, about 13%. UK, about 8%. And then you have all the numbers, Germany, France, Italy. They all contributed more than China did. And China only contributed slightly more than Canada, Spain, and Republic of Korea, South Korea. So that's UN PKOs. So look at peacekeeping fund. This is, again, voluntary contribution. I have the numbers up to 2010. If you look at the countries who actually contributed more than China did, you find very small economies like Finland, like Ireland, like Denmark, Belgium, even South Korea, ROK, contributed more than China did. And China's number was about 3 million. And the biggest donor was Canada. It was about 19 million. And in contrast, the Republic of Korea, South Korea, contributed about 3.3 million. That's US dollars. And China, again, in contrast, contributed slightly more than Australia, India, Egypt, Indonesia. But there are about 7 or 8 countries that contributed more than China did. Look at the financial contribution to the World Health Organization, for instance. As a percentage and also the total numbers. China was the last. China ranks the last as compared to US, UK, Canada, Germany, Italy, Japan, Russia, and France. And the percentage is huge in terms of disparity. China contributed to the World Health Organization financially only about 0.3%. In contrast, you see the US contribution was close to 30%. Even the country that comes closest to China's figure, France, is 1.35%. So you see really huge disparity in terms of these financial contributions. So where has China's money gone? If you have read the Chinese white paper on international aid that was published last year, well, the Chinese provision of financial resources to the outside world was actually quite big. A huge chunk of Chinese money went to bilateral assistance programs in Africa and other countries. And this bilateral sort of assistance really helped China and helped China's efforts in developing political ties with those individual countries in many of the third world countries, but really does not contribute to China's role in global governance, as we understand. So what can we tell from these numbers? If these numbers can tell anything, I'm not convinced that China is really attempting to take a leading role in global governance. It will take a long time for the Chinese decision makers to reallocate priority, probably reallocate more resources from bilateral assistance programs to international causes concerning international global governance. Thank you.
Professor Mo, is it your turn now to at long last?
Yes.
Thanks.
There are many issues here. I just want to make one point, since we have many other experts here on this panel. Maybe let me share a Korean perspective on Chinese global policy. And when thinking about this issue, we have to separate North Korea from all other issues. Right? If you think North Korea nuclear program is a global issue, which it is, that of course we have many disagreements with China. But other than North Korea, I can't think of any issues where Korea and China have disagreements. In fact, I think China, by and large, has been very supportive of Korea's efforts to increase its influence or presence in global governance. I think China supported Ban Ki-moon's election to the Secretary General of the United Nations. And I think China supported South Korea's bid to join the United Nations Security Council, which was successful this year. And China, we have to thank the Chinese for help creating the G20. I think where Korea is a member. And China has been very a founding member of the G20, and ever since then, I think China has been very helpful. And without Chinese support, I don't think the G20 would have,
You never know who's fritzing out, so why don't you go ahead and use the wire microphone.
You can hear without the mic.
Yes, let me make my point quickly. And one instance, though, where Chinese rising influence has had a negative impact on South Korea's views on China's role was, we can go back to 2000, year 2000, where we had this a garlic dispute. That is, we stopped the imports of Chinese garlic, and because of its it was rising rapidly, and China retaliated by imposing sanctions on Korean handset. Now, this is year 2000 before China joined WTO. But ever since China joined WTO, we haven't had any really major trade dispute. So far, it's consistent with my original point. I think China's increasing role in global governance has not really had negatively affected South Korea, except for North Korea. Now, North Korea is a whole different issue. I think other panels out there to address this issue. But there are some recent cases that do not directly targeted us, but that are of some concerns to us. That is that Chinese export ban on rare earth that goes back 2010, and I don't think the government organized these boycotts, but Chinese boycotts of Japanese products this year, I think it's a great concern to us because we might, the same thing can happen to us. So my advice, if I may, to Chinese friends is that, well, you are already very influential. You are already too powerful, especially in East Asia. So when you exercise your economic power, I think that, of course, you have to follow the rule of law, which is WTO. I think China has been very good about that so far. My second advice is that, well, especially in East Asia, we might want to separate politics and economics. That means that, well, we may not be happy with each other's trade practices, but linking that to political issues, I think, is a serious mistake in this part of the world, because as we can see, that, of course, we have very complicated historical issues in this area, so it'll take a long time to build trust. And in the meantime, we should concentrate on economic cooperation without necessarily linking it to a political and security issues. I think that'll be good for all of us. So that would be my point. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Professor Mo. So, sorry to have been delayed. I had both the wrong time and place for this. Have we been through the entire panel then? Is it everybody? No.
I'm the last.
Yes.
Oh, you're the last.
I'm
Okay.
the last.
Well,
That's good.
we saved the best for last then, because we get to hear from the expert himself from China. So go ahead.
You mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. I follow following up the three panelists' views, and largely I share their views of China's role in global governance, and I just offer several thoughts on the topic, and I think the topic is both an easy topic and a hard topic. And an easy topic you can speak, and China as a developing country, China as a latecomer in the current existing international system, a West land on the United States dominated international system, and the Chinese contribution on Chinese ways and the Chinese deeds and the Chinese words in global governance, and still relatively limited. You can see, and China just does something, means China contributes something enough, and means like other players or actors in global governance, China only does something, and China can satisfies itself. Also, for example, and China plays a role in Africa development. Also, China plays a role in United Nations peacekeeping operations or post-conflict buildings, and also China contributes now in the reform process of international financial institutions, IMF as a World Bank. China cooperates with the World Bank as a so-called and World Bank China partnership, and in assisting the South Pacific nations, Asian nations, and Africa continent. But in my view, and because this panel is a scholarly panel, and from scholarly perspectives, I think global governance is a difficult issue, and maybe one of the most difficult issues, and in international relations, in other social sciences, and I'm so cautious and careful and to deal with global governance issues, let me provide some maybe original Chinese perspectives. Introduce some Chinese perspectives. The first one, the topic is about the doing goods and provide public goods and common goods, and not provide common banks. This is a topic about international or global contribution, and so that's why this panel just attracts and relatively little participants from the conference, and in China, and now people who are interested in global governance now talking about, and in the past 30 years, China was governed, was managed by the West, by the other leading economies or leading powers in the world. But now it is the question is it a time for China, and China begins to govern the others. So this is a first relationship, and the first question of China's role in global governance. And some Chinese, including me, and now think, and China should begin to play a larger role in global governance. It means that China also needs to help govern others. But there are a lot of constraints, and now other Chinese new political leadership, and the new leadership declares, and the existing foreign policy set by Deng Xiaoping and implemented by Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, and continues. Means such a low-key foreign policy or Tao Guo Yang foreign policy continues. And this morning, and the plenary session and mentioned, and at least in the near future, such an existing foreign policy will be continued by the new political leadership. So China is now caught in a dilemma. The dilemma is, and China wanted to say goodbye to the Tao Guoyao, the low-key foreign policy, but China has to continue the low-key foreign policy. The dilemma is also about, and China wanted to do more, and as Professor Li Minjiao said, but China's capacity and China's capabilities, and so many other things as constraint limit China's 有所作为. So this is a dilemma, and China is caught in such a dilemma. And second relationship, I would say, and the new Chinese political leadership would like to promote the so-called transformation of Chinese foreign policy and Chinese diplomacy. This is a hot topic about China's another very important transformation, not only economic transformation, but also diplomacy or foreign policy transformation. And I'm one of speaker and to advocate and the transformation of Chinese foreign policy. And in the future, next 5 years or next 10 years, and the new leadership must promote or even finish the Chinese transformation, and from the existing foreign policy to a new one. But so far, and currently, the transformation, this task, and still, in a process of debates, and the target on the destinations of the transformation still are clear. So, this is second. And the third point I would say, there is a debate, a hot debate in China, and talk about the relationship between the China's relationship with the existing Western liberal order on this global liberal order, and China economically and financially, and at least in at least 60% on 80%, and China is a part of such a liberal order, and dominated by the United States or dominated by the European Union, and China is now and such order, but politically, China is still not a part of such a liberal order. So that's why, as Professor Li mentioned, that's why Chinese leaders, including the 18th Party Congress, and Hu Jintao is still stresses not global governance, this in general, but his term is global economic governance. So, and the global China mainly involved in global economic governance, rather than global, general global, including human rights, and so many other political issues. And China very much hopes to be a part of, to be a completely part of global economic governance. So that's why China wanted to increase its voting powers at the international financial institutions, the IMF and the World Bank. And the other things related, this is China also and positively and constructively seeks alternatives of global governance. And in Chinese, saying 另起炉灶, and it means and China attaches great importance to the G20 and BRICS and so many other new groupings, including East Asia regional groupings. And China seeks and the existing liberal order and the International Monetary Funds and the World Bank not enough in delivering global governance. So China seeks BRICS and hopes BRICS plays a larger role in promoting the reform processes of existing global governance institutions. So far, I think and China, I should assess China's roles in such alternatives and getting bigger and bigger. And so that's why now there are a lot of research centers or BRICS and G20 and others established and within Chinese research communities, university communities. And but this is also a dilemma, and how to balance the Chinese role in existing liberal order and Chinese role in reforming the existing international institutions, and China's roles in seeking alternatives with India, with Brazil, with others, even with Russia, and with Korea or with Japan, and the Qingmei initiative in East Asia, example, and last month and in Cambodia, and there was a regional arrangement sponsored by ASEAN and the so-called RCEP, and maybe the RCEP would compete with the TPP, so-called TPP. And my final point is about also there has been a discussions, and about China's role in global governance at home, and China satisfied with the current Chinese role, just a participant, on a major participant in global governance, on a leading participant from the developing world, and China also was to be a decision maker, and a rules maker, or solutions producer, supplier, and so this is a transformation. It's a part of a transformation from just a leading participant. Means Deng Xiaoping's foreign policy principle is no challenging, 不挑战, and not seeks leadership, 不带头, but now China seeks, and China should be not only a participant but also a rules maker, rules producer, international norms supplier. So finally, let me say, so far, China still know little about how to do so, how to achieve such things. For example, China as a rules maker, international rules maker, global governance institutions producer, but China still don't know and does not know how to deliver such goals. So I largely agree and share with you three and your point of views about Chinese role in global governance. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Pang. Now I will wrap it up with Professor Nam from INHA.
Yes, I teach international relations in a university. It's a great honor for me to be here with distinguished professors to discuss China's global governance. Well, since my job is to teach international relations, whenever I stay at home, I watch news, CNN, NHK, BBC, and even Australian news, and compare international observations with the views delivered by Korean media, Korean newspapers. And I think I can deliver or present an idea how Korean media sees China's commitment to global governance. I'm not sure that I present average perspective on this issue, but since I'm one of many Koreans who watch news all the time, so I think I can give some interesting idea. I think we can categorize a country's role or commitment in global governance. Number one can be big benefactor. The second, contributor. And thirdly, bystander. And fourthly, spoiler. And lastly, predator. And there are many global governance issues that China tries to address. And I think in terms of preservation of liberal economic order, China is seen and understood positively by Koreans in order to provide monetary stabilization. When Korea was hit hard by the global credit crunch, we saw China did something good to Koreans. And we also believe, the Korean not we, but Korean media positively describe China's commitment to counter-piracy efforts and peacekeeping operations. So in those areas, I think China is not a big contributor, a big benefactor, but is understood as contributor. But about in regard to proliferation of WMD, like North Korea's missile test and development of nuclear weapons, Korean media see China as a bystander ambivalent, precarious. And in terms of climate change and poverty issues, also Korean media see China have double standards. Sometimes Beijing say that she's very much committed, but at the same time, she does not live up to its promises. And fourthly, in terms of each areas of human rights and resources depletion, I think to Koreans, China is seen as a spoiler. And also in terms of intellectual property right preservation, many Koreans see China as a spoiler. But it's good news that China is not seen as a predator. Predator is the worst category. So in terms of overall view shared by many Koreans about China's commitment to global governance is in the middle, and having positive image at the same time negative images. And the reason why Koreans or Korean media believe China has two contrasting identities in deciding its policies concerning global governance is first of all because China is the second largest economy, but at the same time China is a still developing country. So China has two faces. So that explains why China differs by each areas. And secondly, one of the points that Korean media often pays attention to is an influence of nationalistic education, which started in the early 1990s. And if the citizenry is more affected by nationalistic education, those people who receive their education shows often less interest or commitment to global governance or globalism. So I think that this second point has something to do with why in some issue areas China is a lag behind by compared to its growing influence in global at global international relations stage. Since we do not have much time, I have prepared some other points, but let me stop here and we can have a conversation. And in that process, I can deliver more message, more ideas. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Nam. That was a particularly good framework there at the end. And I wonder if we can start the discussion among the five of you by leaping off your framework and some of Professor Lee's numbers. And Professor Pang, you being the Chinese representative here, you can feel free to take jump in first if you wish to. But Professor Lee, you brought up the hard data about China's participation in, say, the UN peacekeeping operations and the WHO and some others. Professor Nam, you very clearly laid out the central contradiction of China's role in the world, which is that, yes, it's the number 2 economy nominally and will soon pass the United States as the number 1 economy in overall GDP. But at the same time, of course, it has about 6 times the number of people as the United States, and therefore its per capita income is much lower than the United States, and as you say, it classifies as a developing country. So given that situation, what kind of formula should be applied to China in, say, for instance, something like the peacekeeping operations? I mean, you mentioned the United States contributes roughly 27% or something. Well, the US GDP is roughly 27% of world GDP. But clearly, when China gets to that level, they probably shouldn't be expected to contribute to 27 or 25% of UN peacekeeping operations. So how would, let's put some concrete numbers on some of this. I mean, how should China what expectation should we draw concretely from China in some of the things like, let's start off with some things like peacekeeping operations or WHO participation or participation in Global Climate Fund or some things like that. Professor Peng or Professor Lee, whichever one of you wants to jump in first.
Oh, I personally, I predict China's contributions to global governance in general will increase continuously. But the question is how the volumes and the ways of the increase of Chinese contribution. And where we talk about the Chinese contributions, yes, and data and show and the Chinese contributions still limited, and but we should also consider the bilateral level, bilateral channels, and even China's unilateral policies, towards global governance. And for example, the Chinese-Africa relations, and so far, China has given to African nations too much in terms of the Chinese status, and also the bilateral channels, for example, the development assistance, and from the multilateral status on. Contributions calculations, and you may see and Chinese contributions are limited, and still cannot match with Chinese power on economic status. But bilaterally, and China really has given a lot, and such a volume increase.
Professor Lee, bearing in mind this notion that China is rich but not rich, what expectations should the rest of the world have?
It's a very common argument that China cannot provide the amount of financial contribution to global governance because China is still a developing country, because its per capita GDP is very low compared to the US and other developed countries. But you really have to balance the argument here, right? China is the second largest economy. It's national financial revenues, right? If you look at the total number, it's quite big. So you cannot just look at the per capita GDP or per capita income as a basis. The fact that is very striking to me is that the level of disparity, the gap, the gap between China and those countries who have contributed more to global governance. It's not just China-US comparison. You're talking about some very small countries like Finland, right? Ireland, and Italy, right? Much smaller economies than the Chinese economy. So that's actually quite striking. To me, I think fundamentally it's a value issue. It's a value issue. I mean, I don't see the Chinese leadership in their mindset, the value that global governance is a worthwhile sort of international cause. You look at Norway, for instance. Norway spent an enormous amount of money in post-conflict peace building operations in Indonesia, and now it's beginning operations in Myanmar. You never see China developing this kind of program in the world. Also, if you look at the political elite, political leaders, in many developed countries, when the leaders retire, out of office, they actually devote a lot of time on issues concerning global governance, like climate change, humanitarian assistance. But if you look at Chinese leaders, none of them, after retirement, right, participated in any respect in global governance. So my sense is that it's global governance is really a very rudimentary, preliminary concept to the Chinese political elite.
But let me quickly and
Sure.
affect and China's development back and including China's export as import back. These two backs provide China's try to help deliver implement China's official assistance to developing countries. And so far, and the importance and too many in the developing world and the sense has sensed and such two Chinese development banks and play maybe a bigger roles there as a World Bank. So and that's why now and so many developing countries now very much hope China would like to organize the new development banks, internationally development banks. And for example, the BRICS development bank. And this year, India, and South Africa, and Brazil proposed during the BRICS summit in New Delhi. And it is now a hot topic in China. I just provided this.
Let me ask our South Korean colleagues here to discuss what the South Korean experience holds as lessons for China in developing a more active role, say, as a global citizen. I would note that, of course, South Korea has had KOICA for quite a number of years. I remember a short time after I got here, I was impressed by the Bank of Korea reaching out to other nations that had, like it had at the time, excess currency reserves and explaining to countries like Bhutan how to do creative investment management and things like this. More recently, of course, Korea has really been talking a lot about how it is now become a donor nation and has a lot of ODA and stuff. But, you know, why don't the three of you, I'm sure, have many more examples of how Korea has bloomed as a player, as a global citizen.
Can I?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, my department sends about 50 students to Cambodia each year to, help impoverished, rural areas. And it was pretty new development, which I think is now widely understood by ordinary Koreans. In the past, as you mentioned, Korea was also a developing country. So the moment Korea has reached to a certain level in terms of affluence, we started to change our identity. Now we should become a donor country to pay back what we have received from the U.S. and Europe and other developed countries. So I think for China, it's the second largest economy, so it can afford to do many things, but still it has also its domestic constituents. It has to take care of all own people. So in that regard, I think even though China is the second largest economy, we shouldn't expect too much. We should wait until China's economy reaches a certain level as Korea.
I think we should realize that it was only after South Korea reached a certain level did we begin investing in global strategy. I mean, in terms of our contribution to global governance in issue areas such as peacekeeping operation, ODA you just mentioned. So I think this kind of, how can I say it, compromise should be given to China as well. China has been on the rise very rapidly, but still it's a recent phenomenon. So I think South Korea took care of our developmental policy goals first, after which we began investing in global strategy or global Korea. foreign policy. So I think we are being a little bit impatient. When you talk about these numbers or percentages of GDP with which China should be giving toward, should be contributing to global governance, I think it's just, we are, this course is just from the perspective of the West. I think when the West decided to participate in global governance, or when they decide to open up their system to the world, I think they took care of domestic policy concerns first. I think all their decisions are compromised in the domestic political realities as well. All these decisions have taken, they have taken one little baby step after another. It's not like one day they just opened up their market or decided to participate in global governance by one bold strike. No, I don't think that. I think it was more of a gradualist or incrementalist approach that the West has taken. So I think this kind of this compromise should be given to China. As I said during my presentation, I think our discussion on China's proper role in global governance should be based on the premise that China, although China has been rapidly growing and has been rapidly integrated to the international community, still it is a newcomer to global governance. So I think so that kind of compromise that the West has enjoying. The West can't just kicking away the ladder. Just to borrow the metaphor from Professor Jung, the West climbed up this developmental ladder one after another, and just asking these developing countries to participate in global governance or to open up their system all of a sudden is just like a kicking away the ladder, I think. So I think we have to stay more patient toward China, and all other countries in the world are trying to maximize. You mentioned some criticize China using this policy of global governance as a means to advance their national interests. Aren't we all doing that? Aren't we all trying to, prioritize our national interests before any other considerations? So China is just another country that try to, promote and maximize their national interest in the world. So I think, we oftentimes forget that. So that is my answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have to distinguish between the software and hardware contributions. I think hardware contributions. In dollar terms, ODA or peacekeeping operations. But I think what we want, knowing how little we contribute, Koreans contribute to this hardware area, I don't think we expect China to do more than what they are doing. I think they are doing enough in this area. But I think we're an area where we like to see more more constructive role by China is software contribution, that is providing ideas or a leadership to solve global problems. I think we appreciate Chinese efforts to ensure fairness and transparency in global governance. I think especially representing the excluded countries like emerging market, I think we fully support that. We appreciate Chinese support for multilateralism and openness in general. And but as I have said in my first comment, where we have some concern is the Chinese commitment to rule of law. When China exercise its power in the global arena, we'd like to see China more restrained or restraining their power and follow the global rules. That would be my comment.
All right, we just have a few minutes left. Shall we take a few questions from the audience, if there are any out there? I'm happy to hear from all of you. So raise your hand, don't be shy at all. No one will bite. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Jung-Seung from Asan Academy. Throughout the entire day, I've heard a lot of suggestions of a Chinese leadership in the future and how they should take more active role rather than just passive or mediator role. But my question is, I understand that we should be more patient in terms of waiting for China taking a leadership in the global governance. And I understand that the number of economic contribution to the global governance that China will take place on will increase in the future. But what about Professor Pang mentioned also diplomatic change of foreign policy in the future, and how much of China will put a lot of importance in quote-unquote transformation in taking a new leadership in role leadership in the global governance. So what will be a diplomatic change of foreign policy that China will act on in the future? Is there any foreign policy change that will occur in the future?
Yeah, a very possible kind of Chinese global leadership is not China's unilateralist leadership, but China's co-leadership with others. So, in the past 4 years, during American President Obama administration, and the world forecast on a topic so-called the G2. On the European Union also intervened and talked about the G3 and China, European Union, and United States, and also talk about the other G groupings, and China can play a leadership role in such groupings, and it means the Chinese global leadership will be continuously conditional. For example, with the United Nations mandates, and China can take a leadership in post-conflict development on the peacekeeping operations, and also in regional cooperation, China can take a lead. And financially, in East Asia, under the Qingmei initiative, and China, and Japan, and Korea, the 3 countries under the framework of ASEAN plus 3, and China takes the lead. But this is not just Chinese single leadership, but this is a co-leadership. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization also is another example. This is a Chinese-Russia co-leadership.
Right, sir, very quickly, we need to...
Professor Shambo.
Yeah, right here.
Doesn't this panel go to 5:30?
No, to 5 o'clock.
We should end.
I thought I was totally screwed up on the time myself. I thought it was totally different, but...
Okay, well, briefly, I'd like to, Professor Lee mentioned some of the impediments to China's contribution to global governance. I'd like to sort of supplement those a little bit. One is the whole concept of global governance, like domestic governance, has to do with public goods. Okay. So, there isn't exactly a great consciousness inside of China about public goods, either by the society, there isn't increasingly by the society, but the government hasn't philosophically bought into that. Secondly, philanthropy. Underlying concepts of global governance are concepts of philanthropy. That's not exactly well developed inside of China either. Third, Chinese tend to, I would argue, approach everything in a transactional nature, like a businessman. If I'm going to invest in something, I'm going to get a return. So they think of global governance in terms of what's the return going to be, either status or more tangible. That's not obviously the way to approach global governance. You give, and there's some, country. It's an investment in the world, right? It's an investment in global stability, development, and so on. Third, Professor Pan mentioned this, underlying global governance are liberal principles and institutions that were formed by the West without China present. So they're very uncomfortable with all that. Fourth, global governance issues are by nature transnational in nature, most of them. Whereas China's emphasis on state sovereignty runs up against, I would argue, that transnational nature. Fourth, there's a preoccupation in China with the domestic, not with the global. And fifthly, it's a matter of money. Global governance, to contribute to global governance, is a luxury of developed or newly industrialized countries, but as you quite pointed out, China's got the second largest economy in the world. They should be contributing much more in the WHO and all these other organizations. So I agree with just trying to supplement some of the explanations on why China may not be punching, well, China is punching way below its weight. I agree with the panel here. And then the question is, what do we do to get China to punch at its weight?
Anybody wish to respond to that, Professor Pang, real
Okay.
quickly, I guess?
Just a quick
Yeah.
response to Professor Shambo. And thank you very much. And last month, I was in Ethiopia to attend Chinese, very important China-Africa forum. And I also helped moderate a session on the no interference, Chinese for the policy principle, no interference. And I found a fundamental conflict between the existing liberal doctrines or liberal principles and with the Chinese ways and the Chinese behaviors according to no interference in Africa. And but finally, I found, and participants, speakers, and reached a very interesting conclusion. Is because there have had a lot of cases of failures, and the failures means the liberal orders, liberal principle, liberal practices, and failed in Africa. For example, provide something in Africa, and China, and surprisingly, and in some areas or in many areas, and China, and succeeded. And so this is a relationship between the success and the failure. So that's and some people from superficial observations think, oh, this is about Beijing consensus. This is about the China model, the success of Beijing consensus. The Beijing consensus is a rival of the Washington consensus. The conclusion, my session, the conclusion is, and such superficial views should be abandoned. And in the future, and we can, and the world can have, have a third way to go to global governance. Means China contributes its ways and its source, its methods to global governance, and the West also needs to reflect the existing practices. So, and we are now standing at a crossroads in global governance. So let China contribute its ways, its source. This is a story about my corpus in Africa. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much to all of you professors for participating, and I guess we now go to a break for a few minutes, and then there will be another panel coming along at 5:30, I believe.
Right, so we have a 15-minute break now, and then we will have the second plenary session, China in Northeast Asia, that will begin at